Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is a podcast after all. You choose the place, time, or platform you choose to listen in on. Welcome into the Slumpbuster Week 2 recording here on Thursday, August 8, 2019. Find us on the Spotify app, Google Play Store, iTunes, or our YouTube channel. We really appreciate your support. This week, we're going to continue our discussion on the NFL divisional breakdowns, with the AFC NFC East pictures being the topic of today. Also included in this podcast, we're going to be delving into some of the headlines out of the National Basketball Association. This week, we had an interesting interview between Carmelo Anthony and Stephen A. Smith on First Take. And they've also released the schedule for the opening night, the Christmas schedule, and some of our international games. Welcome in, Aundre. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Julian?
I'm doing fantastic. So, starting first with the NBA schedule, the Christmas night games, the opening night games, what are some of your thoughts looking off of the list?
Yeah, so I guess if we run through the list real quick, right, some of the prominent ones that we see, Los Angeles Lakers versus Clippers, New Orleans Pelicans, right, you get the Zion wow factor versus Denver, Boston, Toronto in the East, also Milwaukee, Philly, and then Houston Golden State Warriors. So overall, I want to say I think there's definitely some exciting games, right? Especially when it comes to the Lakers and Clippers are the matchups I'm most excited for. One, because I'm a Lakers fan, right? So I'm excited to see this new look team. It actually seems like the Lakers will be good for the first time in about a decade, right? Where they actually have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs. But the other reason, though, is one, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George both spurn, the Lakers a little bit, right? So, of course, there's the whole tampering thing with Magic Johnson trying to get Paul George over. He said he was coming. Hey, just wait the year for me, right? You don't need to trade for me now. What happens? They waited. He doesn't even take the meeting, right? And then Kawhi, they ended up waiting, this season, obviously, this offseason, I should say, for him in free agency, thinking, oh, we're going to build a dynasty, right? It's going to be easy wins, some more championships, possibly enough championships to overtake the Boston Celtics, right? And what ends up happening, though, is Kawhi goes to the Clippers and takes Paul George with him. So I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. I think this may be the first time in a while where we get an actual good Lakers and Clippers rivalry, right? So every time that the Lakers have been good, Clippers have been bad. And ever since the Clippers have been good, Lakers have been bad. But now there's actually going to be a really good rivalry. And it actually means something, right? Like, I think both teams have a decent shot at making it to the NBA Finals as well. So,
yeah, definitely when you look at the Lakers and Clippers this year, it seems as though you're looking at the top 1 and 2 seeds in the Western Conference. A lot can change. I mean, the West is going to be still very competitive. I'm not going to write the Warriors off completely yet. I think that the Rockets are going to be a dangerous team out there as well. And then you also have the more don't really have superstar yet kind of teams like Utah and the Nuggets who are ready to take that next step.
Yeah.
I even like the Blazers a little bit as well to come out of there. But as far as the going back to focusing on the main schedule, so one of the big things that stood out to me is the NBA is really wasting no time in unwrapping their shiny new toy in Zion Williamson. They have him both featured prominently against the reigning champs on opening night there in Toronto. And then they're going to also have him on Christmas versus the Nuggets. It's kind of interesting to see like a rookie get such prominent headlines. I know the Pelicans are kind of an interesting little squad. And when we start talking more into predictions for what's going to happen this year, I even kind of see them potentially being a 7-8 seed in the Western Conference and sneaking in because I like some of their pieces on that roster. I think they have a good coach. So a lot can happen. The only thing is I feel like the NBA could also potentially be setting themselves up for failure having Zion on that Christmas Day schedule. What if things don't quite work out? What if he's not what we picture? I mean, he's still young, so people are going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he'll figure it out. But a lot of juice could get lost in that matchup between now and Christmas Day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the opening night, I think the expectations might be a little bit lower. I know Toronto is a little bit weaker, right? So they waited out all of free agency for Kawhi, didn't get him. So Toronto is going to take a step backwards than what they were. But especially with the Christmas Day one, right? So he's going to be going up against Jokic. Denver may possibly get Michael Porter Jr. back if he's healthy. I know he's been very injury prone, but what I've heard, when he's healthy, he's very good. And honestly, Denver's my sleeper pick in the West. So even though I'm a Lakers fan, I honestly think Denver's the squad that can possibly beat both the Lakers and the Clippers, right? Especially if you look at not necessarily their first and second guys where the Lakers might be better, right? But once you start getting to the third, fourth, fifth guy on the roster, I think Denver's much better than the Lakers and even the Clippers.
Yeah, but the main kind of concern I have, particularly with the NBA when it comes to like eyeballs on that game, not a lot of people are going to be tuning in for Denver. They're going to be tuning in for Zion. And if Zion is a disappointment by that time in the season, it's going to be interesting kind of like see what the ratings are. I mean, hey, he could live up to expectations, and that game could be huge. But it could also be a huge dud if the Pelicans are struggling and the Nuggets just don't command the kind of attention that the NBA wants on their Christmas schedule.
Yeah, well, I mean, not only is Denver tough, right? So that's exactly why I pointed that out. But the other issue being that the Pelicans are an interesting squad, but they're still a young squad, right? So you do have Kyle Korver, you do have Holiday, right, who are your veterans. But when you think about it, you have Lonzo Ball, who I thought for the most part was still kind of unproven with the Lakers. He did everything really well except for shoot, right? And a lot of people have issues with that. He also had an issue with staying healthy. Same thing with Brandon Ingram. Even Josh Hart, right, had some tendonitis, I think, in his knees and ankles. So you have a lot of young pieces that I think the Pelicans are going to be relying on, that if they're not playing very well, how does that impact Zion's success in Zion's season, right? And so all of it could be a recipe for a fun, exciting team, but it can also easily go bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, too, you kind of touched on the Raptors a little bit. The Raptors winning, Kawhi departing, kind of also put the NBA in kind of a weird spot for this year as well. So it's just tradition that the reigning champs gets an opening night game. Unfortunately, now you're really going to have to depend on Pascal Siakam and Lowry to be able to bring attention to that game. And obviously they don't have the same national appeal. They don't have that star power in that matchup. Even like their Christmas Day matchup against my Celtics, I'm not the most thrilled to see that game, to be honest. I would have much rather saw on Christmas Day the Celtics versus the Nets. I think both tying in Kyrie's return to Boston along with the Christmas holiday would have been huge, especially since the Nets are absent altogether from the Christmas Day schedule, which is unique. I know they don't have Durant this year and they're relying purely on Kyrie to carry their team, but I still feel that Kyrie has enough star power to command a prominent spot on Christmas Day.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think the problem with Toronto, so Toronto is still going to be very good. They're still long. They still play very good defense. They'll be a tough team, but you're right. Like, they don't have very much star power behind that. Like, all their players are very good players, don't get me wrong, right? Like, even Van Fleet ended up coming a little bit into his own towards the end, right? Like, Steph Curry was switching off of him in games, but none of those names really have that star power, like you're saying. Even Kyle Lowry, I think we saw that he wasn't necessarily the best guard. Like, he was pretty good towards the end of the series, but I think he had fouled out the first 2 or 3 games. So you're right. Toronto doesn't have all of that sort of pizzazz that comes with them. Whereas if you do have a Brooklyn, right, especially if they're playing Boston, it's sort of, you get that revenge match and you get the exciting, hey, what's Brooklyn, 2.0 going to look like versus the Boston Celtics that, he sort of got the bad rap for, right? Like, a lot of times Kyrie was blamed, I think, for why Boston had struggled a little bit, which in some ways I thought was unfair, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought there were a lot of, I guess there was a lot of blame that could have gone around for Boston's season last year. But I do think it makes for a better storyline. And you're right. I do wish it would have been the Christmas Day matchup. We'll get to see Kyrie versus Boston, but it would have been better, on Christmas Day.
Even just having Kyrie on the slate altogether, having that new Brooklyn squad on the Christmas Day schedule just made more sense to me. I wouldn't even have minded if they put him against the Knicks. And I don't love the idea of seeing the Knicks squad on Christmas Day. However, I do think that prominent New York matchup added with the added fuel that I'm sure Kyrie's going to receive as much booze as he's going to receive in Boston as he would in Madison Square Garden. Those Knicks fans are going to be a little bit agitated after this offseason they just had.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I think the Knicks did a decent job, right? So everybody gives them a lot of crap because they struck out on all the big free agents, which is why they cleared the cap space, right? So they got rid of Kristaps Porzingis, had, spot for 2 max free agents, and didn't get anybody. That being said, their team is not awful, right? Like, they're definitely probably not going to win the East. They're not going to compete for a title. But could I see them making the playoffs in the East? Absolutely. And so, like you said, the added, sort of East Coast, that New York versus New Jersey-ish sort of rivalry. And I think it would have made for a really good, fun matchup. The environment, it would have packed Madison Square Garden. The crowd would have been really into it. It would have been a fun game.
Also on Christmas Day, though, in addition to seeing a potential Western Conference Finals matchup between the Lakers and Clippers, you do have a great matchup there between the Bucks and 76ers. I think most people would say that that's who they project in the Eastern Conference Finals this year, those two squads.
Yeah, and I think the Al Horford element, right, going up against Giannis Antetokounmpo now makes things really interesting, right? So Joel Embiid is extremely hard to defend. He's gonna put up some points for him. But the Al Horford defense, being able to possibly stop Giannis, that's what I'm really looking at.
Yeah, it does seem like that's going to be a very compelling matchup to watch, especially after last year. Seeing if Giannis could take some more steps as a shooter. I mean, you can obviously say the same thing about the 76ers squad when it comes to Ben Simmons. I've been seeing some videos lately that he's at least trying it, which is encouraging, but we'll see if you're already 3 years into the league and still haven't developed a jumper. It's cause for concern. Going away from kind of like breaking down those teams for the time being. Also, you do have scheduled in there the Westbrook return to OKC. So as much as we said that Tyree is going to receive his boos when he goes back to Boston Gardens, I think Westbrook is going to get showered with praise. So that's going to be nice to see. Mm-hmm. That's going to take place in early January. We do have also as well the international games mentioned. So it looks like Mexico City is going to get some love here in December. On the 12th and 14th, respectively, you do have the Mavs and Pistons going down there, and then you do have the Spurs and the Suns. It's kind of interesting to see the NBA reach out to Mexico. There hasn't been a lot of Mexican star power in the NBA over its existence. So the outreach there is going to be kind of a new effort, I assume, to kind of brand outward towards them. And hopefully by the time the next generation hits, we'll see some talent come out of Mexico. Geographically, the Spurs and the Suns make sense to me. The Mavs and Pistons is a little bit more of a reach. And then, too, when we look at the other international slate, so the NBA is also going to go to Paris this year. They're going to be sending the Hornets versus the Bucks over there. Obviously, the Bucks, that's going to be exciting. Giannis, obviously a big European star, so he's going to draw the crowds over there. However, obviously, you kind of wish they would have scheduled a better opponent. The Hornets, at this point, losing Kemba Walker, don't have any juice to bring to that matchup. You think Michael Jordan goes over there?
I mean, maybe, right? Just to have a vacation in Europe or something like that. So I think you're right. So I don't know what the fan base will be like in Mexico. I'm glad they're trying it, and I think it's definitely a good year for the NBA to try it. It's probably their most exciting year there's been in a while, just because the team race is so open, right? So in the past, it's been just Golden State or just the Miami Heat or just the Cavs, right? Yeah. But this year, it can literally be any team, right? So if you can get maybe a new audience like Mexico City and Mexico in general hooked, I think this is the year to do it, just because everything can change next year, right? With Kevin Durant coming back, and you'll have Klay Thompson coming back. You'll get some of those new guys, right? Zion will develop a little bit. So I do think it's a good year to branch out. Don't know how successful it will be. The France game, I definitely think there's potential there. Not in this game itself. I think you're right. The Hornets are not the most compelling opponent for the Bucks. I sort of wish they would have put another European star out there, like a Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, honestly, I was just about to say that if they would have put the Mavs versus the Bucks, like not only do you have Kristaps in that matchup, but you also have Luka as well.
Yeah, and Giannis. So you have a lot of your European stars that I think people would have liked. The other thing too is I would almost say the Spurs would have been better out in France too, just because you have that tie to like Tony Parker, right? And he'd always play on the French team when he played international ball. So I thought I thought there, honestly, even Rudy Gobert with the Utah Jazz might have been a little bit better than the Hornets. But hey, I think it's a geography thing, honestly, and time zones.
Yeah, there's that. I think too, the NBA was maybe being a little stingy on sending which stars they wanted to send on international travel with these games. Like if the NBA really wanted to make waves, obviously they would have sent like a Lakers Clippers squad. However, these teams can work. There is some interesting squads in here. We do think the Mavs are going to be a more competitive squad. The Pistons, they do have Blake Griffin and some star power over there. When it comes to the Spurs, I mean, fundamental basketball, they're going to be what they are with Pop. The Suns, obviously,
are stuck in permanent rebuild. They're in like purgatory for NBA teams, I guess. But.
Yeah, and I don't even know what we're going to get out of the Hornets this year. Probably top 3 lottery right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on past the schedule talk. So this week we had the interview between Carmelo Anthony and Stephen A. Smith on First Take. I know I have listened to it. Have you given it a listen yourself?
Yeah, so I got to listen to most of the highlights, read through some of the articles around it and some of the quotes and stuff. So I did think it was interesting to hear Carmelo's perspective on what happened, especially with how the news was broke to him.
Yeah, at this point, though, I mean, it just feels sad for Carmelo. I think the league's basically forcing him into retirement. Do you think that Carmelo has anything left to add to the game?
So here's the thing, right? So Carmelo got to be a 10-time All-Star, Olympic champ by playing a certain way, right? He did a lot of his ISO ball, was sort of the go-to guy, would put up, sometimes 62 points a game, I think was his high or something like that. I don't think his style works anymore. So if he's willing to adapt, I think there are some things that he can add. He's a little bit slower defensively now, right? So he's definitely a liability when it comes, close to the basket, right? So within 6 feet and 10 feet, he was giving up a whole lot of shots and opportunities. But I do think as a spot-up shooter, so I want to say it was something like 90.5% of his 3 points that were assisted, he made them. He just didn't take that many of them, right? Which I don't know if it was necessarily a system thing or the rotations or what it was. So his 3-point percentage was actually below league average, but it was because he was so bad at taking his own 3-point shots. Whereas, like I said, when he's assisted, he's actually not bad. So maybe there's a role for him. It would depend on the team, though.
Yeah, it's just really interesting when you read some of these like quotes from the interview. I felt fired. Daryl Morey telling him, we no longer need your services. Him having to justify never saying he was on a farewell tour. I know I can still play. It just kind of sounds desperate. And I think, honestly, it sounds cruel, but I think the NBA is doing him more of a service at this point by not signing him to a team and letting him walk, because the longer this goes, because one of the main quotes from there is going to be, you're telling me there's 30 teams in the NBA and I can't make a 15-man roster. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to see him with the Charlotte Hornets on a kind of like we saw Tony Parker last year, or some other random obscure squad? Is he going to be Vince Carter for the next 10 years, just kind of like hanging around rosters, continuously bringing down his per game averages? I mean, at this point, too, you look at his per 36 minutes every year since 2012, it's been consistently going down, except one little blip in the radar in 2016. 2012, 2013, 27.8, 2013, 2014, 25.5, 2014, 2015, 24.4, 2015, 2016, 22.4. Went up, and like I said, in 2016, 23.5. And then obviously the last 2 years, 18.2 in OKC. And then in the 10 games he played for Houston, 16.4. In the 10-game stretch he played for Houston, it ended on a sour note. His last game versus Oklahoma City, which, could have been a premier matchup, a revenge game, 20 minutes, 1 for 11, 0 for 6 from 3, 2 points.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's sort of sad to see where his career has gone, right? Because a lot of people remember him, right, as the Hoodie Mellow, the guy that was awesome in Denver, even in New York, right? He was still a pretty big thing, the Olympics, all of that. Um, but I think you're right. I think if anything, he may be able to sign a vet minimum. He said he was willing to come off the bench. But then the problem that you have, right, is most of the top contenders right now, I think, have basically filled up their roster. I would like to see him maybe go to Denver, right? Sign a vet minimum, go to Denver, and finish out, do a sort of farewell tour where it sort of all started.
But does he fit like how they play?
That's the thing. I don't think so. Maybe coming off like with the second unit, because sometimes I've heard that coaches like to have a slightly different style of play, right? Just so you could keep defenses on their toes and make sort of adjustments. But at the same time, like I think a cohesive system is important, right? So I could see the argument against that. And honestly, there's been talk about his locker room presence too, right? Like he's a 10-time All-Star, so he sometimes acts like it. At least what we've heard in the past, right? So he seemed very sincere now, right? I'm sure he would do his best. We've seen guys change, right? DeMarcus Cousins, I've heard, has been fantastic since he was injured, right? I think he understands that, hey, I've got to do what I've got to do to prove myself, right? So I've heard his behaviors changed from when he was with Sacramento. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't know if we'll see Melo on a team though this year.
Yeah, and I think it's even more telling too that he's not even getting invited to play with USA Basketball right now. A 3-time gold medalist, and Jerry Colangelo, the head of USA Basketball, just wants to stay away from him. Here's literally the quote that Colangelo gave in an interview this week. I understand, and this is reference to the interview he did with First Take. I understand why the agent, he's looking to get him the exposure, looking to get him another shot. But the only way Carmelo can really be satisfied is for him to have another shot in the NBA with another team. And recently he's been aggressive media-wise, letting people know, I feel like I can still play. I just need an opportunity, blah, blah, blah. With us, that would have been more of a distraction, as we discussed. We need to focus on the team concept. We're having a bunch of new guys, and we're going to go with the new group. And when you insert a different element and it distracts in any way, you lose it. That was it. That's no reflection on Carmelo. I love the guy, but I don't think it would have been healthy for our program at the time. See, that's the most telling quote I think I've heard in this closure to Carmelo's chapter. And I think it's a very somber note to end a career on.
Yeah. And it's a very strong statement too, right? It's not like we considered Carmelo, but we didn't think he was right at the time, where it's kind of wishy-washy. It was very direct in that, nope, we're going a different direction, and Carmelo is not a part of that direction we want to go in and that strategy we want to execute.
And, too, it's even more disappointing when you consider that this is probably the weakest USA basketball roster that the U.S. has had in at least a decade and a half.
By far.
Yeah.
I mean, like, trust me, I love Kyle Kuzma. I think he's a great player, but on previous USA teams, there's no way he would have made that top 15, right? When you have guys like Anthony Davis was playing right out of college. You had LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, all these superstars. But now our USA squad, most of our superstars have said, no, we're going to focus on, and I think part of it is because the NBA is so open this year, we're just going to focus on being with our team, getting ready for the actual season. So
yeah, and it does make sense when you read into Colangelo's comments in reference to it as a young team and they don't need the added element in it. Obviously, you have like players like, honestly, most of the Celtics roster right now is on the team. Clearly, we learned what a bad locker room presence can do to that squad. So maybe they just don't really need it on the USA roster right now.
Yeah, and I also wonder if, because it's such a young squad now, if they're turning their head towards, hey, we just want to develop players. And just from a basketball standpoint, Carmelo Anthony and the style of play that he played, doesn't really meld with that strategy like they were saying, right? So if you're looking to, hey, we just want to develop USA basketball for the future, especially like this will still be a good squad. I still expect us to be one of, if not the most competitive country, right, in the world. But now it's, hey, how do we develop these future stars, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of good squads out there in this year. It's the U.S. is still going to be the favorite, but the bar, it's a lot closer than it used to be, and like you just don't need any liabilities on the court, whether it be a locker room wise or whether it be if you really do think that Carmelo is a player in full on decline.
Yeah. And like I said, like even further from a development standpoint, do you really want to take minutes away from a potential future, all-star to give it to an aging, declining, previous all-star that you've had that may not necessarily be very good anymore?
Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to make this a little bit more cheery by, we got to talk about the Jets. Never mind. So we're going to be talking about the AFC East picture now. Similar to last week, we're going to be discussing it from the bottom of the 2018 standings on up to the top. So that would give us the New York Jets right now. So this team is personified by a few key changes, particularly when it comes to a lot of the incoming talent, a new change in the head coach, and then they did fire their previous GM and bring in someone over from the Eagles organization. So going down the list, big free agent acquisition obviously begins with Le'Veon Bell, putting an end to the saga of last year's holdout. We did also have a very notable signing of them acquiring C.J. Mosley from the Baltimore Ravens, one of the more prominent linebackers in the league. And then they really bolstered their offensive line this offseason with the additions of Kelechi Osemele and Ryan Kalil bringing him out of retirement, adding some strong veteran presence around Sam Darnold. I definitely like a lot of these changes they've made. I think the arrow is pointing up on the Jets, and I would be excited. I don't think they're quite there just yet, but if you are a fan of this team, you have to like the direction they're heading in.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're the most improved team in the division by far this year. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win it. In fact, I definitely know they probably won't. But I could possibly see their potential being second in the division. They definitely cleaned house, even with the coaching staff, right? So not only did they get a lot of new talent in the door, but Adam Gase, as you said, right, is now head coach. They also got new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. So I think that's all good. My main concern, though, is Adam Gase sort of bashing Le'Veon Bell's contract, right? So he'd even said, hey, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have given him that contract. Well, now, you're his head coach, and we've seen Le'Veon Bell when he doesn't quite get along with an organization back in Pittsburgh, right?
Well, according to Le'Veon Bell and Adam Gase both, they've talked it out, and they are okay where they currently stand. You do have Le'Veon Bell playing the active good soldier right now, putting out quotes like he's ready for 500-plus touches. Now, traditionally, that kind of goes against what Adam Gase has done with his offenses. He hasn't really established a true bell cow back, or at least a back that can contribute that amount of touches in a given year. Granted, one of the big arguments in Le'Veon Bell's holdout last year with the Steelers was he was more than just a running back. He's an offensive weapon. And that shows by his last full season, 2017, 1,291 rushing yards, 85 receptions for 655 yards, so 1946 total scrimmage yards. That was a career high, too, 406, which I definitely do think contributed to the holdout. Le'Veon Bell was concerned that the Steelers were going to run him into the ground, and when you look at a total of 406 touches, it's hard to argue that that's not what they were doing. The main question that comes up when you do talk about the Le'Veon Bell holdout, though, was it worth it? So his current deal that he signed with the Jets this offseason is going to be 4 years, $52.5 million, $27 million guaranteed. One of the big arbitrages is that you did have him reject a 5-year, $70 million deal with the Steelers. Now, when you read into that deal, only $10 million of that was guaranteed. So I could understand why he turned down that offer. The only thing, though, is when you consider he only picked up $27 million guaranteed, and he lost out on the $14 million from the 2018 season. He's technically went through all that drama for $13 million at this point.
Yeah. So I see that argument, right, that he's not getting that much more money. But if we're to look at, let's say, a different sport right now, right? So let's go back to the NBA, for instance. And we look at Klay Thompson, we look at Kevin Durant, some of these guys that we saw this past season get injured. In basketball, your skills are a little bit easier to retain, right, if you suffer an injury. Now, Kevin Durant's Achilles injury is a little bit scarier, I would say, from a recovery standpoint than Klay's ACL injury. And sort of we've seen bigger players not be able to recover as much. But when it comes to running backs in the NFL, right, there's some that can recover. Like we've seen it where they've come off an injury and they hop right back and they're just fine. But I could see Le'Veon Bell's reasoning for, hey, I don't want to get hurt if I don't have a long-term deal, especially with more guaranteed, especially at the rate that running backs get injured, they're getting hit. And like you said, he was getting a whole lot of touches in Pittsburgh, one of, if not the most utilized back in the league. And that just means there's more chance for something to go wrong. So I see both sides. I'm a little bit on Le'Veon Bell's side, even coming from a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, in that's how he makes his money. That's his way of life, his bread and butter is by having a healthy body, not being hurt, not being injured. So if he does get hurt, let's say on that franchise tag, then that totally ruins his next contract. And maybe he doesn't even get even $10 million guaranteed, right, on his next contract.
That is a fair point, though I do think that most people are of the belief that even if he did experience an injury short of a catastrophic, horrible injury that maybe happens once every other year, he would have still got equally the amount of money he got paid this offseason with the Jets, plus he would have had the $14 million from last year.
Yeah, but he's also been injured in the past, though, right? So does that now mark him as injury prone? So if he gets injured for 2 seasons, misses extensive amounts of period, do teams now start to change that line of thinking, right? So if it's one injury and it's, he tore his ACL once but bounced back from that, he's been good ever since. But what if it's now 2 ACL tears, right? Or an Achilles tear?
But I do think that there has been a modern movement, and you can blame Adrian Peterson for this. We're going to talk about him later on. But the ACL, in terms of your injury scale, has definitely doesn't resonate in the same way it used to. If there was any injury that would cause more concern, it would definitely be head injuries in the NFL. And you do parallel it to the NBA. We just saw a few stars, a couple stars, and Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant even suffer catastrophic injuries, particularly for a basketball player, and still get paid max deals. So I do think that someone would have paid him, even if he did experience the injury short of, again, something similar to more what Teddy Bridgewater experienced a few years back.
Mm-hmm. No, I could see that argument. I think it'll be really interesting. I think he has sort of started this whole movement, right? So we're starting to see it trickle down with Melvin Gordon, Ezekiel Elliott. So I think it's an interesting time right now in the NFL and what it means to be a running back. What does it mean to be more than a running back, like you had mentioned, right? If you can catch passes, if you can block, if you could run, does that mean that you deserve to get paid for more than just your typical running back?
Well, the key to, I feel, being a modern-day running back, particularly one that's going to be able to stick out as a star running back deserving of these bigger contracts, is going to be a diversified skill set. Most teams, I feel, would be satisfied being able to have a rotation of guys as opposed to one guy getting 400 plus touches in a given year.
Yeah.
Look around most of the modern backfields, you have someone that can pass, someone who's good in goal line situation. It's very rare nowadays that you will find a full-on 3-down back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to scale how much those are worth, and is it worth it to pay them when you do have a set cap? Now, moving, it's interesting too. You mentioned Adam Gase. It did cost Mike Maccagnan his job, at least according to some reports. They went in, they brought in Joe Douglas from the Eagles organization. A lot of what I hear from that is Joe Douglas was one of the main architects in building up the Eagles to what they are right now as one of the better organizations in the league. So that's exciting. And then when you look at the roster they built up, I definitely think this team, I don't see them ready to compete quite yet, but I like a lot of their pieces. They brought in Greg Williams to be their defensive coordinator. Yep. I mentioned last week, I thought Greg Williams could have easily been hired as head coach for the Cleveland Browns last year, the way he got that team playing towards the end of the season. Now he has some pieces here with Quinnen Williams, drafted with the number 3 overall pick. And then you have C.J. Mosley, which I mentioned was a very nice fit for their front 7 rotation. You have Jamal Adams, who's, if not the best safety, at least a top 5 safety in the league. I like those pieces. And then what they did, like I mentioned with the offensive line, so Sam Darnold was sacked 30 times last year. You want to keep your young quarterback up on his feet. When you add Kelechi Osemele, Ryan Khalil, 2 anchors to stabilize your quarterback, that's going to help him a lot, especially in his development. Moving from a defensive-minded head coach to an offensive mind in Adam Gase, someone who get a little bit creative, that's going to help Sam Darnold. And then you even do hear reports out of training camp that he has improved arm strength. Now, it's a little tough to buy into that a ton because for the most part, a full-grown adult, your arm strength is what it is. You can make modest velocity improvements by changing your form, your throwing motion, which maybe he found the right combination for him. Maybe he changed his strength regimen a little bit and it allows him to have more whip or velocity on his ball, which obviously that's going to help the offense as a whole around him. I do appreciate that. I feel like the Jets have something that they haven't had in a very long time, a stable quarterback situation.
Yeah.
Even if Sam Darnold doesn't take a step into being a top 10 quarterback this year, I feel confident in moving forward, whereas I never felt the same level of confidence in a Geno Smith, Mark Sanchez, the couple seasons they had sprinkled in between with a Ryan Fitzpatrick or Josh McCown. He is a stabilizing presence, and I do think Adam Gase will get him, if not to that elite tier, at least help him make modest improvements. And then, again, just going back to having Le'Veon Bell, it's going to be interesting to see how Le'Veon Bell does react to be working with an ascending quarterback as opposed to an established Hall of Famer. You do have – I don't hate Robbie Anderson either. He, I think, is a very underrated receiver they have there. He can get open on guys. I do think he's going to compete in the red zone, which is going to be huge for Sam Darnold's production. I do think that this roster is going to do well moving forward. With that said, my final roster prediction for them is going to be 6-10. And going back to last week's question too, what would have to happen for this team to win the division? It does come down to the teams around them. But if this defense can be a top 5 unit in the league, I do think that would be how they would have to win their games for the time being.
Yeah, so I really don't have too much to add. That's the exact record I had, 6-10. I do think they maybe potentially could get up to 8-8, though I think that's a little bit of a stretch. The one weapon that I'll say that I'm interested in is Jamison Crowder, which I don't know if you had mentioned him or not, But as of recently, I think injuries have sort of derailed his career. But if you look at his 2016 season, that was almost a Pro Bowl season. Had 850 yards, just about 7 touchdowns. So I think he was about 150 yards shy probably of making a Pro Bowl, or at least being in that tier of talent. So that's another weapon I think that they've added. Though again, I think
the quarterbacks definitely do need talented receivers in the slot, and we've seen a movement in the NFL where talented slot receivers can really advance your team. It's not necessarily needing 2 burners on the outside anymore, but having someone who could decimate the middle and get open in coverage.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I don't have too much to add. Their defense was not very good last year. I do think they have improved. I thought they had some good pickups in the draft, like you said, Quinn Williams, Ja'Kai Polite. But it's going to be tough for sure. I think the Patriots would have to take a big step backwards. The Bills would have to go a little bit stagnant, and then you'd have to see some big gains from their offensive weapons, a lot of buy-in into the new coaching staff, and major improvements on the defensive end.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to wrap up talking about the New York Jets for now. We're going to move on to the Buffalo Bills. I actually really like the Bills. They were in the playoffs just a couple years ago, ending a very long drought of a playoff run, which it was nice to see for their fan base. They have one of the most fun fan bases in the league. Shout out to Bills Mafia. I kind of actually see this team as a sneaky wildcard team. That's kind of where I see them. I think we might actually spend more time talking about the Bills than Antonio Brown was a Bill.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I agree. What I find interesting, so they signed 5 linemen free agents, right? So that's kind of a lot of moving pieces, but their line was also very bad last year. So Josh Allen, he only played 11 games, but he was sacked 28 times. So I think you had said Sam Darnold was sacked 30 times, was it?
30 times in 16 games. So,
16, yeah. So
5 less games and just 2 less sacks.
Just two less sacks, exactly. So if you project that out, that's close to 41 sacks, so if he had played all 16 games, right? So that would have put him in the top 10 of sacked QBs last year. So hopefully those new linemen that they have can protect Josh Allen a lot better. Now, even despite that, I thought he still played pretty well last year, and showed some promising signs.
Yeah, you know what's going to actually, too, also protect Josh Allen, I think. So they added some new receivers there, Cole Beasley and John Brown, that 2 guys that can get open in coverage. We mentioned the importance of having a talented slot receiver. Cole Beasley, he has a 74% catch percentage last year. He saw the 5th most receptions out of the slot in 2018. I think that he does add a new dynamic to this offense, and it does bring out a new dynamic for Josh Allen. So obviously we know in terms of raw tools, he's one of the most interesting prospects in the league. He has that huge cannon of an arm. And I think because of that, he naturally is inclined to want to look downfield a lot more. So having a slot receiver like Beasley that could get open in that 1 to 10 yard range will make him perhaps have him make quicker decisions. He'll probably get coached up more to take the checkdowns, and that will reduce the amount of sacks, amount of pressure that he sees in a given game. So obviously I gave Lamar Jackson a lot of grief last week when I was breaking down him.
Yep.
Now, Josh Allen, one of the big things from his 2018 rookie season was he was a bit of a runner. Like in terms of skill set, he compares a lot to like a Cam Newton.
Yeah.
631 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, which made him the league leader for quarterbacks in that category. Now, there's some differences between him and Lamar. So one of the big ones that stands out to me, obviously, is their frame. So obviously, Josh, he's a bigger guy. He can assumedly take more of a pounding than Lamar can. That's one of the bigger ones that stands out. And then in terms of the reports I'm hearing out of training camp between the two. So whereas I'm starting to hear that Josh Allen's starting to take that next step as a passer,
yeah,
I'm hearing more in Lamar's camp that they're doubling down on him as a runner.
Yeah, well, I also think how much of it was necessity coming from Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson, the running was coming out of comfortability, right? And
yeah, I mean, looking at closer at Josh Allen's runs, not a lot of them were necessarily designed runs by the quarterback. And a lot of improv, which, he'll have to cut down on if he wants to extend his career.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously you mentioned the Bills are taking steps to keep him upright, keep him on his feet by improving that offensive line around him. So I do think that it is an apt comparison when you consider them two athletic guys that just struggle as passers. However, you also factor in the arm strength on Josh Allen is up there with only comparable to Patrick Mahomes. In fact, when they were talking about having a throwing competition, I really want to see that one day.
Yeah, I would love to see that. So a question I'll ask you then. So what do you think about LeSean McCoy? So it was by far his worst statistical season ever, right? Didn't even get 800 total yards.
Mm-hmm.
He is going into his year 31 season, right? So, 31 years old, I should say. Not 31 years in the league.
No, Frank Gore's been in the league 31 years.
Yeah, that dude's been around for forever. But so
do you think, shout out to Gore.
Do you think that was because of the offense and the offensive line, right? So do you think Shady McCoy took such a big step backwards because it was such a weak team that was around him? Or do you think that's an age thing? Because if he can get back to what he was with Philly, they can have a pretty decent team, I think.
Well, here's the issue. So you have to really factor in LeSean McCoy's running style.
Yeah.
Definitely a more side-to-side runner. So when you factor in aging, he's going to lose that. He's going to take a step back. So dancing around more when you have younger, quicker linemen and linebackers chasing after you, that's going to hurt. And last year, it was no secret that the Bills weren't an aerial assault offense. So, you could load up the box a little bit more on them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Without fear of being hurt necessarily over top. Although I do think when you factor in weapons like John Brown, that opens up the deep ball quite a bit more for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting. So the unit that the Buffalo Bills have built up here. So they added Frank Gore, which again, I love Frank Gore. It's amazing how he's been able to be in the league this long, succeed, and play at a high level. But
the position he plays, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We hear a lot of times, all you get is 3 years to 5 years out of him, right?
But with that said, I don't know if he's necessarily a compliment to LeSean McCoy. Now, there was a lot of speculation as far as how long McCoy is really going to be on this roster, especially, too, by the time that the actual games start getting played. There was a link. Could they send him back to Philly, send him home, quote unquote? Mm-hmm. But I think it is realistic to see McCoy get cut from this roster. And why I say that is because in the third round, they invested in Devin Singletary. Now, when you look at a lot of the scouting profile on Singletary, he's been described as a young LeSean McCoy. Lateral quickness. Mm-hmm. He's been working in with the ones. He's amazing at forcing missed tackles. These are a lot of things that we used to say about Shady whenever he was first getting in the league. And I think you don't really need two strong veteran running backs there.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
So
I wonder about, right, we always talk about you have quarterbacks and they learn underneath somebody, right, for a year or something, right? So let's say they take sort of a red shirt type year. Pat Mahomes did it. Aaron Rodgers had done it on Brett Favre. Do you think that would work with running backs as well? Though I know there's a whole lot of cap implications, right? Do you really want 4 running backs, taking, that much of a cap hold? And So there's a lot of other calculus that goes into it for sure.
Well, in theory, right now, looking at this backfield, how it would break down is you would have LaShawn McCoy starting. You would work in Frank Gore periodically when Shady needs a rest. Mm-hmm. And then you have TJ Yeldon, who's always been a very solid contributor as a third down back, there to contribute as well. And then Devin Singletary would probably be on the bench given that situation. However, I don't see this being necessarily the best unit in terms of like how they're built. I think that someone needs to go. Mm-hmm. And I think the logical cut would be McCoy in this situation.
Okay.
Especially in terms of how much money you have to pay out. I don't know what the financial implication would be necessarily if they do cut ties with them. Mm-hmm. However, I think it's Shady's time in Buffalo is coming to an end. One of the things, too, that stands out about the Bills that's going to help them potentially win games, and if they do get into the playoffs, is going to be this defensive unit.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very, very underrated. If you actually look, they were the number 1 pass defense in the NFL in 2018, and then number 2 in total yards allowed. So this team is very, very stingy. They do have cornerback Tre'Davious White, who was, as a rookie, graded as a 90.1 according to the guys at PFF. He did take a huge step back to gain graded as a 62.5. So if he can bounce back, that's going to make a world of improvement for him. I imagine probably what contributed to him taking a step back is as a rookie, he probably didn't get a lot of matchups with number 1 wide receivers. So it's going to be interesting to see if he could step up to that challenge. Then you do have last year's draft pick, Tremaine Edmonds. When he came out of college, he was graded as a very raw linebacker, but the skills were there, the athleticism was there, and they could see developing. He's a very smart guy. I could see him taking a huge leap forward, too, at minimum. He's a tackling machine, so he's going to be very great in run support. And then the guy in the middle, Ed Oliver, so their first-round pick. Now, Ed Oliver, one of the comparisons he gets is to Aaron Donald. That's a very lofty praise for a rookie, and oftentimes what is kind of the fault whenever you do make those comparisons for guys. But he is an athletic specimen, and I do see him being a force. At minimum, if they just send him as a straight bull rusher, he's going to disrupt a lot of plays up the middle. Now, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, it was a well-publicized fight he had with his coach in college. So you see kind of what his attitude is as he is in the pros, but I do believe he has a very strong head coach in Doug McDermott, and I do think that that's going to be a great influence for a young guy like Ed Oliver. So my final predictions for this team, I gave them a 9-7 record. I do see them sneaking in as a wild card team. And yeah, I do think that Bills Mafia has something to celebrate this year.
Okay, that's not
a lot of tables getting busted.
Yeah, jumping off of the tables, off of their pickup trucks or whatever. Yeah, that's interesting. So I have them slightly lower. I have them 8-8, not going into playoffs, though I do have them second in the division over the Jets, though. If somebody were to talk me into the Jets taking second, I think I might be able to say okay with the improvements they've made. My main concern, so we talked about their defense. They had, like you said, an underrated defense. They were 18th, though, when it comes to points allowed. And so I'm guessing their red zone defense is not the greatest because, like you had said, their defense, their passing defense was outstanding. Second in yards allowed, right, from a defensive perspective. So if they can improve their points allowed, I think you're right. I think they do have a shot at possibly making a wild card. I personally don't see it right now, but this is becoming a pretty decent team. They're not a contender yet, but maybe a few more big moves and some improvements from Josh Allen, they could be.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so moving on. The Miami Dolphins, by all indications, most experts agree might be the worst roster in the NFL. I'm having a very hard time disputing it. One of the big headlines for this team in particular is going to be their young quarterback acquisition. So they basically, if you think about it, drafted Josh Rosen this year. So he went from a first-round pick, top 10 pick, to essentially being a late second-round pick this year. So with Josh Rosen, this, in theory, would be based off how the quarterback competition is going, is aiming towards being a rookie redshirt season, volume 2 for him.
Yeah, behind Fitzpatrick, right?
When you look at it, what went wrong in Arizona? So they had a defensive-minded head coach in Steve Wilkes. They did have some problems with their offensive coordinator. They started off with Mike McCoy. Then they diverted and hired Brian Leftwich to be their OC for the rest of the season. You had Larry Fitzgerald's in decline. They had young wide receivers like Christian Kirk out there who weren't quite ready to take that step from the college to the pro game. And then they had the worst offensive line in football, or at least one of the worst. All of their original starters on their offensive line ended up on the injured reserve by December. Even while their starting unit was in there was 52 sacks allowed, 109 quarterback hits, 4th and 5th respectively in the NFL. So this is just not a winning combination if you're trying to bring in a young quarterback like a Josh Rosen, especially one that has some character issues described by many. Some have compared him to Aaron Rodgers in terms of attitude, just obviously not in terms of accomplishment at this point in his career. I am excited for him to have a new lease on life, to go to another situation. Obviously, you look at where he's heading. We're going to talk about the Patriots, but the Patriots can't play forever. So when you look at this division right now, you literally have 3 first-round picks from the 2018 draft all at quarterback. All 3 in the top 10. That's insane. So this division is going to be fun to talk about for a long time. But when you start to compare, though, so obviously he had a defensive head coach in Arizona. Well, he has a defensive head coach in Miami, Brian Flores, who's coming over from New England.
Who's brand new, right? So
the offensive coordinator to start the year is going to be Chad O'Shea, also coming over from New England. He was the wide receiver coach over there for a very long time. Then when you look at the offensive weapons around Josh Rosen, their wide receiving unit is questionable. One of the main wide receivers he's going to have to throw to is going to be Devontae Parker, who was a first-round pick in 2015. But Devontae Parker's career high in games for a given year is 12, and over a 4-year stretch has only 163 receptions. You have players like Kenny Stills, their running back situation. They have like Kenyon Drake there, who is it just Adam Gase didn't like him, or does he not have the skill set that allowed him to stay as a every down runner, or at very minimum a early downs running back?
Yeah. Well, and I've even heard that Kenyon Drake's even having trouble keeping the starting spot. So I hear he's slotted in there for now, but he may very easily lose that as well.
Kalen Ballage is gaining a lot of talk right now as a potential starter over there, though there are questions whether or not he can necessarily be the answer at running back as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think Miami overall is in rebuild mode. Interesting, though, right? So they basically, like you said, drafted Josh Rosen this year. They're probably going to have Fitzpatrick start over him, which Fitzpatrick has some strokes of brilliance, right? There's a few games that you'll get out of him like that. You'll be like, oh, man, he's playing better than he's ever played, but then he turns right back into Fitzpatrick like we normally see.
What I'm going to be most interested about is whether or not him and his now teammate Minkah Fitzpatrick have a dispute over the trademark on Fitzmagic.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, so I've heard this rumor, right? Or at least it's been put out there that a lot of people think Miami is going to tank to try to get Tua out of Alabama next season.
Great point. I was going to bring that up as well.
Yeah. So then do you run into the same situation with Kyler Murray, right? So with Kyler, they said, hey, we want to make it very clear in Arizona that he is our guy. we're shipping off Josh Rosen. So then if you go out and you draft Tua if you're Miami, which it seems like he's projected to be the number one pick in the draft probably, or at least the highest ranking quarterback in the draft. Do you do the same thing to Josh Rosen again? Or do you try to keep two young quarterbacks, have them compete for the spot? So I don't know. I think it's an interesting dynamic right there.
Yeah. Well, I think at that point, that's where the business element of the NFL comes into play. No matter how much they like Josh Rosen, if they see Tua as a better fit, they're going to go with their guy in the same way that Cliff Kingsbury went with his guy with Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
I do think that it was a little unfair to Josh Rosen. I do think that there was a possibility he could have succeeded in Arizona under the Cliff Kingsbury offense.
Mm-hmm.
But they ultimately saw it as a better fit, shipped him off to Miami. And now it's hard to predict what the Miami offense is going to look like. This is going to be Chad O'Shea's first run as a coordinator. And obviously, again, you have a first-time head coach as well with Brian Flores, who's not going to be really involved in offensive play calling coming over from the defensive side. The biggest thing is just going to be the lack of talent. On the bright side, he's not going to be dealing with nearly as bad of an offensive line as he was dealing with in Arizona.
Yeah.
Laramie Tunsil as their left tackle. Obviously, he was famous for the draft fiasco where he was caught with the weed bong on his face.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's long gone. And since then, he's established himself as one of the better left tackles in the league. There are some positives on the defensive side of the ball. Xavier Howard is very solid from the cornerback position. Kiko Alonso, although he has been questioned in terms of necessarily his ethical play, he is by far a very highly regarded linebacker as well. They did go out of their way to pick up Christian Wilkins out of Clemson. He was arguably the leader of that very talented Clemson defensive line that led them to the national title. He can work inside, outside, short yardage. He can even cover running back. So, there is some potential pieces there, but this team's a long way off. And it doesn't help to, so we did mention the quarterback competition. It's more than likely Fitzpatrick is going to start this year.
Yep.
But if Fitzpatrick struggles, which is very likely when you look at the early season schedule, they do get fortunate. 3 of their first 4 games are going to be at home. However, week 1, Baltimore. Week 2, Patriots. Week 3, they travel to Dallas. And then their 4th game is going to be against the Chargers.
Yeah. And I could very much see them going 0-4 in that stretch, even though they have, 3 of the 4 are home.
And at that point, if you're 0-4, what are you starting Ryan Fitzpatrick for?
Mm-hmm.
You might as well see what you have with Josh Rosen. And if he's not the future, that's fine. You wasted a second-round pick on him, which is much more palatable to take than if he was your own first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
However, it does bring in concerns the long-term prospects of Josh Rosen as a quarterback in the NFL, whether he's even in the backup tier, which we'll see. He should, by all indications, have a long career ahead of him if he wants it, but is he going to be a starting caliber player or is he going to be a backup?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, we've said he's been playing on 2 of the worst teams in the NFL. And so sometimes it's difficult to evaluate a quarterback when they don't have a good supporting cast around them, right? So even Aaron Rodgers has struggled in these past few years because he just hasn't had that great of a supporting cast around him, even though everybody always says, Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks there is.
And Aaron Rodgers is able to overcome that because he had the amount of talent in himself, as opposed to Josh Rosen, who does have the skill set that many scouts regarded when he did come out of college, the intelligence. But, it's actually interesting. He's not even technically the smartest person in the quarterback room right now. I mean, it's hard to argue. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I know it's become a joke about him, but he is a Harvard graduate. So
yeah. So, I do kind of feel bad for Rosen in the situation that he's in. And I very much could possibly see him on his third NFL team just in 3 years. But I think he's kind of gotten the short end of the stick. Didn't have a great team in Arizona, likely will not have a good team. And even with new head coaches, new coordinators, there's even likely, even if it was a decent team, that there'd be some bumps and bruises. And
he does himself disservices from time to time too.
Yeah.
Like, let's not act like he's completely innocent sometimes in these situations. I did like the confidence he had when he did make a claim, oh, the 9 teams that didn't draft me, they all made mistakes. But when you do that, you really just put a target on your back. And now that you're in year 2, like you said, potentially staring down the barrel of either being a career backup or being on another NFL roster to start off your career, it's not a good look.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for the dude. I thought he was talented coming out of college, though I do think he's sort of gotten the short end of the stick. I see them going maybe 2-14, definitely at the bottom of the division. Where do you think?
I had them at 2-14 as well, so we do agree on that. I think the last thing I'll say on Josh Rosen too is, like you mentioned, his college career. I think when I see NFL quarterbacks, I do want them to be able to dominate at the college level a little bit more. He did leave a lot to be desired at UCLA, and same goes for too. I didn't even mention it in our Bills discussion. That was one of the more controversial things about like a Josh Allen too. Like, you do expect these quarterbacks, especially these tier 1 quarterbacks, to dominate more while they're in college. That's actually going to be a point of discussion when we get over to the NFC side of things with the Giants.
One of the worst signings that I could think of right now.
Moving forward.
Okay, let's go.
To good old Tommy Terrific, the New England Patriots. So one of the things I want to promise for this podcast is when the Patriots inevitably lose 2 games in September, we will not overreact. Promise?
I promise. I 100% promise, right? So
when they lose week 2 against the Miami Dolphins in Miami, we will
not
overreact.
Yeah. Well, people have been overreacting since 2005, right? So
I feel like Tom Brady was supposed to retire a decade ago.
Yeah. Well, we talk about Frank Gore being in the league a long time. Tom Brady is legit. He probably started the league, man. So
yeah, I think the Patriots fatigue oftentimes keeps us from giving this franchise their due, though. And I know it does hurt from your side as a Steelers fan.
Oh yeah.
Even as a Niners fan, knowing that Tom Brady's favorite team growing up was the San Francisco 49ers, it does hurt to see how well this franchise does year after year so consistently for basically the entirety of our lives. We've known nothing but Patriot success.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a child that was brought up in the last 2 decades, you have seen this team just consistently win. And even in the 1 year they don't make the playoffs, they still go 11-5.
Mm-hmm.
How insane is that consistency? They have had a first-round bye every year since 2009. They have been to 8 straight AFC title games. 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls have featured this team.
Yep.
When will it stop?
And if they win the division this year, that's 11 first places in a row in their division, right? So that's literally more than a decade of taking first in your division. Back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
So
well, there was some news this week that gave fans around the NFL kind of some mixed hope, a lot of mixed signs. The Tom Brady contract extension, kind of not extension. If you look at the specifics of it, so it's a 2-year extension, meaning 3 years left with the Patriots, right? Wrong. Apparently, at the end of the 2019 season, the contract will void for the final 2 years, 2020, 2021. Tom Brady is not allowed to have a franchise tag placed on him in 2020, which why would you, if you were actually playing in 2020, you wouldn't need to put that provision in a contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did get an $8 million pay raise from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is going to frustrate everyone who hates this team is they managed to open up $5.5 million in cap space this year.
Yeah. No, this team is by far one of the most brilliant franchises in sports, right? So not just the NFL. They're probably one of the most brilliant and dominant franchises in all of sports. I do think it's interesting, right, that there's still – so a lot of this is Kraft, right? Tom Brady and Kraft are boys. And this is very much sort of anti-Bill Belichick. And I don't mean that in that it's to spite Bill Belichick. But Bill Belichick is famous for constantly saying, hey, I'd rather move off a player 1 year early than 1 year late. Yet they continue to play Tom Brady. He's going to be 42, right, this year, this season. And yet they still kind of signed him to an extension. They're taking good care of him this year for sure, giving him that raise.
So what I was reading from it is essentially he will be a free agent at the end of this year. However, the Patriots do have an exclusive signing window where they could re-sign him and then push off his cap hits for another few years. So in theory, the end to this ride, it could be continuous for at least another few years.
Yep.
And at this, you mentioned Bill Belichick. It just seems like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are staring at each other, and they're just waiting for someone to blink. Because I do think that Bill, what his ultimate goal is he wants to win one without Brady.
I think so, right? Because a lot of people are giving Tom Brady all that credit. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Bill Belichick is underrated by any means. I think a lot of people know he's the best coach in the NFL.
And we're not saying that he's that petty that he does need the praise. It's just a matter of his legacy when compared to the other greats. I think it's well established he is the greatest coach of all time, in the same way I have already given up on the Brady-Montana discussion and have proclaimed Tom Brady the greatest quarterback of all time as well.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, I think you're right, though, in that Bill Belichick, think about it. He's had Tom Brady for since the 2000, right? And so luckily he hasn't had to rely on any other quarterback. But at the same time, from sort of your coaching, I guess, sort of pedigree and accomplishments, it very much seemed like he could have done that same thing with other quarterbacks. Like when Garoppolo took over, they went on a winning streak. There's Matt Castle, right? Was also a replacement for.
So officially in that time during the Brady suspension, they went 3-1, 2 games played by Jimmy and 2 games played by Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett, and that's what it is. And they were still able to win quite a few games. So I think from Bill Belichick's standpoint, right, he could easily have said, hey, look, I was able to win multiple championships with multiple quarterbacks. That shows that it wasn't just the quarterbacks, right? It wasn't just the athletes that I had. It was me. I was able to do it with my system. Didn't matter who it was, place, quarterback A, B, and C in, and I still got it done. Whereas a lot of people, right, so if you take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of people say, oh, Tomlin only won because of Cowherd's teams, right? And a lot of people will say that, oh, this person only was so successful because they took over a great team that was built before them. Well, if you look at Bill Belichick and if he's able to do it without Tom Brady, he can easily say, nope, it doesn't matter who my team was. I didn't take over from anybody else. This is all me, and I built this dynasty. But now you sort of have to share that credit with Tom Brady, which I don't know if he necessarily minds, right? But now a lot of people are like, well, it's Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the quarterback. He's the GOAT, right? So,
when I do think about Bill's legacy, ultimately, even if he doesn't get his way, him and Brady go out together and he doesn't win another title without Tom Brady also being attached to it, he still does get the moniker of greatest coach of all time simply because outside of New England, he still was one of the main architects behind a couple of New York Giants titles as the defensive coordinator. He still was moderately successful in his run with the Cleveland Browns. They were a playoff team, and if you take away the adversity they experienced with the move from Cleveland to Baltimore, they were largely projected as a potential championship roster as well. Mm-hmm. So Bill did all that, it's ultimately, you would think that Tom Brady is going to lose this war of longevity just because, whereas, Bill coaching obviously isn't as physically demanding as playing in the league.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, this does have to come to an end, and we do see signs of deterioration in Brady.
By far last year. Yep.
Yeah, I do think there is something to TB12. I do think there is something to his training regimen, but he's not performing at the same level that we're used to seeing Tom Brady perform at. I mean, look at last year's Super Bowl. Tom Brady of years past could have easily doubled up those numbers. Heck, even Tom Brady 1 year prior in the previous year's Super Bowl when he threw for 500-plus yards.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think Tom Brady's deteriorating. The Patriots system is so good, though. He can still probably deteriorate for a few more years and still be above average as a quarterback in the league. The other thing I think that helps, too, is how easy their division has been. Now, we talked about the Bills have been getting better. The Jets are getting slightly better right now. So it's going to start to become a little bit tougher. But the past few years, Brady's had it pretty easy for 6 games, right, out of every single season. So I think that has contributed somewhat to it.
Yeah.
On a slightly different point, so moving off of Tom Brady, another one of their great athletes that we saw walk away this season was Rob Gronkowski. Mm-hmm. But what I find interesting, so a lot of people are like, they're not going to be as good, right? You would think if you lose an athlete like Gronk, yeah, that definitely hurts your team. But they went like 20-5, at least up through 2017. So I don't know what their record is since then without Rob Gronkowski, but they were 20-5 up to that point when Gronk didn't play. So that's an 80% win percentage. So that would still give you 13 wins in a season. Which is insane to say, right? Like one of the best probably athletes in the NFL. He is probably better at his position than anybody else. And you still can win 80% of the time without him, right? So I don't see them taking much of a step back this year.
No, and I think what it's going to come down to is they're going to change the dynamics of their offense. Bill has done this multiple years anyway. If you're a fantasy football owner, you know the frustration of dealing with the way that the Patriots rotate running backs. But they have Sony Michel was drafted in the first round last year. They have James White, Rex Burkhead. They drafted Damian Harris this year in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. Their running back rotation is as deep as it's ever been. Mm-hmm. But all different guys who could do all kinds of different things and cause havoc for a defense. So when you consider that, Tom Brady is not going to be as relied on as he needs to be. He's going to have those explosive games from time to time, but this is going to be a primarily run-first team. They did draft a receiver in the 1st round this year, which is a bit of an oddity for them, but they went ahead and got N'Keal Harry. And N'Keal Harry is very talented, albeit off to a slow start in camp. He's known for the spectacular play, and I do think that that's going to come in at certain points throughout the year, and we're going to see more of that as the season progresses. I hate grabbing the shovel to bring this guy back from the dead, or at least his name, but Josh Gordon could potentially get reinstated this year. I've given up on even having long discussions about Josh Gordon because it's a tired topic. At this point, the guy is either going to get his life together or not.
I think it's past that point. I don't know if I just hope he gets his life together, not even just to play football, but just to get away from the drugs and some of the other things he's been wrapped up in.
Yeah. And you would think that he's in a situation that would be perfect for that with the New England structure around him. The fact that he has a Tom Brady to say, hey, let's go play catch, You would think maybe Tom Brady's just love of football, because the biggest thing you could say about Tom Brady is he loves the sport of football. Mm-hmm. If that could rub off on a guy like Josh Gordon, that would be huge in his steps towards recovery. I wish him the best with it. from a football standpoint, that would be a huge addition to this team. Even if he's not what he once was, he's still a talented receiver to have on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what they lost this year, so they lost, Trey Flowers. We talked about him last week when we were talking about the Lions. He was a big piece of that defense, so it's not going to be something you don't notice when they're out there on the field. And they did obviously lose Brian Flores to a rival, so losing your coach, your defensive coach, that's going to hurt. I mean, obviously their matchup against the Lions last year was interesting because, the Lions really took it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you have a former coach in division, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays up when they do play the Dolphins, even if the Dolphins are a struggling roster. I feel comfortable wrapping it up on where I see this team finishing.
Mm-hmm.
I see them as a 10-6 finisher. So this would mean they don't capture the first round bye. This is kind of, I do think you're going to start to see cracks in this dynasty, but I'm not going to pronounce them dead. I do still think that even if they don't get that first round bye, they're still a Super Bowl team. There's even potentially a Super Bowl favorite, but I do like other teams like the Chiefs and the Browns and the Texans a little bit more than that. I do like them as a whole.
Okay, that's interesting. So I know we talked about they lost some people on defense. They did pick up Michael Bennett, though, right? So 3-time Pro Bowler. I don't see them taking that big a step backwards, especially – so I haven't looked at their schedule as a whole, though I do know it's predicted to be one of the easier schedules in the league.
Well, I would counter that by saying that they do still have to face a first-place schedule. So they're going to face the Chiefs. They're going to have to face the Ravens, which we'll see if the Ravens take a step back. But at the very minimum, they always play New England tough.
Mm-hmm. They get up for that game. I still see them going 12-4 though. So I still see them obviously winning their division, and I think they still have a decent chance at getting a bye. Part of it though, I think, is just the mental factor, right? From teams in the AFC just constantly having to go up against the Patriots, constantly losing. So even if the Patriots are slightly worse this year, I think there's still that big brother syndrome, right? Of, oh shoot, I got to go play big brother again. So I have them better than that. I have them 12-4.
I would say you're right. They are in the heads of their opponents in the AFC East, and that has contributed a lot to their success. In terms of their early season schedule, so they're going to start off with the Steelers, always a big rivalry game. So they're going to be pumped up. It's at home. So that's going to be unique. This is going to be the first time that the champ isn't going to be playing on Thursday night in a long time. As per the NFL, we'll be featuring the Bears and Packers to open up the 100th season. Then they, like we mentioned, they go on the road to play the Dolphins, which usually they play this game in late December, which causes them issues in terms of the Miami climate being much different than what they experience in New England at that point in the year.
Mm-hmm.
They do play improving Jets, and they do play the Bills for their first 4 weeks. So they face 3 out of 4 of their division opponents. So in theory, if they can get through that early part of the schedule, they're going to have a commanding lead in the division, which could potentially allow them to coast a little bit more than they have in years past. It's just going to be interesting to see, do they come out slow like they traditionally do, or do they gear up a little bit more knowing that they're going to be playing people in division?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have too much else to add to that. I still think, especially with Tom Brady getting older, I think he's still at least has this one good season in him, and he wants to prove it, right? Everybody's been saying, oh, he's past 40. Last year was, he's on the decline already. So I still see him getting up for every game. You're right. There will be some games in the division that are a lot harder than they have been in the past. We even saw them lose to Miami recently, though this Miami team is much worse than some of their teams in the past. But the Jets and the Bills are better. I still see them having a pretty easy time with the division this year, and again making it back probably to the AFC Championship.
Okay, fantastic. So 10-6, 12-4. We'll call it on the AFC East.
Mm-hmm.
Moving onward. So this year we're going to talk about the NFC East now. Starting at the bottom, the Washington Redskins. The Washington Redskins last year, they were leading the division with a 6-3 record, and then a catastrophe hit with the Alex Smith injury. From there, they kind of went into a bit of a free fall, understandably so, finishing the season 1-6 post-injury, ending with a 7-9 record. Mm-hmm. And things didn't get much better for them. They brought in Colt McCoy shortly after Alex Smith, and then he breaks his leg.
Yeah.
And then you add that to just the insane amount of injuries that this roster has had to experience. Between 2017 and 2018, 70 players have missed minimum one game. 50 ended last season on the injured reserve. In the last 2 years, they have had the most rotations between their starting guards just because of the injuries, which is terrible if you're trying to protect your running backs and certainly, most importantly, your quarterback.
So real quick on this injury topic, so I don't want to derail us too much. I know this podcast has gone a little bit long. Do you think it's a training staff issue? Do you think it's a cold weather issue? What do you think it is that causes so many injuries? Is it a field issue, right? Because if the field that you're playing on is not well kept, right, that's room for injuries. What do you think it is?
Well, that's certainly possible. Most of these injuries do tend, when you go down their roster, have been stuff like ACLs, soft tissue, torn pecs. If you ask Trent Williams, who's one of the more notable holdouts and one of the big stories around this team, he says it's related to their training staff. In fact, most holdouts you see are related to give me more money, money me, money now. However, when it comes to Trent Williams' holdout, he either wants the training staff gone or to be traded.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I think very rarely do you hear athletes come out against the training staff, right? Like probably the most notable in recent years has been Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs. But I think now with all the injuries, especially Kevin Durant getting hurt in the finals because it seems like they rushed him back, now you have athletes willing to come out against training staffs, right, and say, hey, no, I don't trust them. I don't trust what they're doing. And if I play, I fear that I'm going to risk getting injured. So I think it's really interesting. If I'm Washington, I would kind of listen to that because your training staff value-wise, right, is not as valuable as your players. And so if your players are saying, I'm not going to play anymore because your guys basically suck, I think you have to replace them.
Well, we'll talk about them here in a couple weeks, but when it comes to my Niners, they actually did fire their training staff after such a large amount of injuries hit them as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops more because so far through their early training camp, they've experienced some injuries already. So that kind of diverts some of the blame from the training staff. However, in particular with Trent Williams, what he was trying to say is he did have an issue where he had a small growth coming out of his scalp that they told him not to worry about, and it ended up requiring surgery. So, and then when you do consider what happened with Alex Smith last year, this poor guy almost lost his leg twice because he ended up developing an infection after surgery. So there is something that going on here that's disturbing when it comes to the way that injuries are handled in Washington and the way that these players are getting hurt. Could that also potentially be? So, like, you have Jay Gruden there. And, the one thing we know about the Gruden brothers is they're from the old school. So the way they maybe handle practices, granted, you can't go as hard on players as you used to, just according to the rules from the new CBA. But maybe there's something going on there, too, that a regime change could change. And, speaking of regime changes, Jay Gruden came out on record with this quote. If we don't make the playoffs, I probably won't be here anyways. Well, news, this roster is not going to make the playoffs. I'm going to just come out with my prediction. I see this as a 5-11 team, and I'm going to give them 5 wins because I do believe in some of the pieces they have on their defensive unit in particular. I do think they made a terrible contract decision getting Landon Collins, a safety that struggles in coverage, doesn't fit in the modern NFL nearly as well, although I do believe he is a solid player, and that's going to help. They did try and make a nice signing, take advantage of a poor situation and sign Reuben Foster. Unfortunately, one of his first snaps in OTAs, he tears his ACL. So this team is interesting. And you know what? Josh Norman's not helping it, because I'm sure that a team that suffers this many injuries doesn't want to see their players jumping over bulls.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting way to spend your preseason, right? Even doing more risky stuff that can get you hurt. Yeah, I had this team going 6-10, so one game better than you, though if you had to tell me that they would be worse, I would not be surprised, honestly.
Well, a team that has you've heard the old phrase, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. Well, now we're talking about three quarterbacks on this roster. So they went out and acquired Case Keenum. They had Colt McCoy on the roster, and then they went out and drafted Dwayne Haskins.
Yep.
It's very unlikely. It's very unlikely that they keep all three of these guys.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see who they establish as the best fits, because Colt McCoy, he knows the offense, he knows the system, so he's probably a good fit from that standpoint. Albeit, if you want Dwayne Haskins to redshirt, I don't know if he's necessarily the best person to have as your starter. Case Keenum, he's just coming in. This is going to be his third team in 3 years. So maybe the learning curve on the offense may take some time. But, we've seen Case Keenum have a modicum of success in the NFL. And then I think that ultimately what they should do with their quarterback situation, I think they should just start Dwayne Haskins.
I think so too. And I thought they got Dwayne Haskins at pretty good value. So we're going to talk about the Giants, right? And I thought they made a mistake drafting Daniel Jones that high, but I thought it was a pretty decent pickup for where they got Dwayne Haskins. I didn't think he would fall that far, especially playing in one of the bigger conferences, right? So in the Big Ten, putting up the numbers he did. He is fairly young still for a quarterback, but I think he has potential.
I think he certainly had more tools, and I do. Again, going back to the topic of your quarterback at least flashing in college. Now, hey, the most winning quarterbacks in college don't always succeed in the NFL. We've seen that fail multiple times, just like most GMs just see it as he's a winner. He's a gamer, It didn't work out for Tim Tebow. It's not going to work out necessarily.
Larry Jones had outstanding numbers
in college. But when you compare that, we're going to compare him to Daniel Jones, obviously. And the thing about that is Daniel Jones had limited to no success in college, whereas Dwayne Haskins, we at least saw him flash. We saw him make the most of the talented wide receivers that he had on the outside. When it comes to Jones, it's mostly just you know what? Honestly, too, let's just move on. Let's just move to the Giants at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I guess to wrap up my Redskins thoughts, I thought they had a decent draft. I don't see them going anywhere. I would not be surprised if Gruden does get fired, especially because of the comments. I'm excited because their draft, they're not going to have a good year, though. So, all right, let's move on. Let's keep going.
So, Daniel Jones. So, part of the thing – so, we knew the Giants had to draft a quarterback. They forced themselves into the situation last year with their decision to take Saquon. And you know what? It almost worked out for them. The only thing is they just couldn't get out of their own way with this draft pick. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but when you have a quarterback who his top 10 games in terms of passer rating, none of them were against a top 30 opponent, which tells me that he's not necessarily attacking the better defenses. But his quarterback ranking was 66 among college quarterbacks. Most NFL quarterbacks right now that are starting, their average rank is closer to 25 in college. So you're seeing a huge gap. And are we convinced that this redshirting experiment is even going to work out? Because when you look at Eli Manning, his decline is not only rapid, but so noticeable. And it's been noticeable for the last 3 years. In fact, should the Giants be thanking Ben McAdoo for benching him when he did? the only thing that Ben McAdoo really messed up on, I felt, was the fact that he's starting Geno Smith, whose career was already well established to be a backup career.
Yeah.
You should have at least started Davis Webb, at least see what you have there, rather than trading
Especially you weren't going to win. You weren't in the running for that season anyways, right? So why try to go with people you've already seen what you got? You might as well try something new. Yeah.
I thought I heard mention, what if Daniel Jones preseason does look good? Can you really justify starting Manning over him?
Yeah. Well, and so what I've always thought with this Daniel Jones thing, because we always talk about player comps, right? Like so-and-so looks like we were talking about with Aaron Donald earlier, right? And it gets dangerous even for fans to do player comps. To me, it seems like the GM and ownership and the front office is doing player comps with Daniel Jones, because they're saying, oh, he plays just like Eli, and he's, he reminds us of a young Eli. So if it's bad for fans to be doing player comps and just sports media, you definitely don't want to be doing player comps as a GM and using that as your decision maker to draft a quarterback.
Yeah, and certainly Gettleman's one to embellish on players he drafts. I mean, last year, one of the main quotes that he said about Saquon is touched by the hand of God.
Yeah.
Now, I do agree that Saquon is, I consider him the best running back in the league.
Oh, yeah.
But chill on the man crush, Dave.
Yeah.
The thing, too, about Eli Manning, if his name was Eli Jones, am I convinced he's still playing right now? If he doesn't have the rings from those 2 Super Bowl runs, would the Giants have given him as much run as they have? And maybe this falls on ownership. Obviously, the Mara family is very close with Eli. Yep. Eli's family is very powerful, so he has a lot of say. But this needed to happen not this year. It needed to happen a few years back. Not, Eli's 38, and it doesn't do him any justice, obviously. Not only do you have Brady, like we mentioned, competing at age 42, and still at least the previous year at MVP level. But when you compare him to his peers coming out of that same draft class, obviously Big Ben is still putting up huge numbers. Phillip Rivers is still putting up huge numbers. And they're leading their teams to not only top of, not only their division leads, but, they're making their teams potential Super Bowl contenders. At this point, all Eli Manning is doing is pushing his team higher up in the draft.
Yeah. No, it's the quarterback situation is bad. Not only that, but now their receiver situation is a little bit messed up too, right? So you got Golden Tate might get suspended because of the anti-drug policy and he came out with a statement saying, he thinks he's innocent. He reported it right away. That still doesn't mean that he won't get suspended, right? Like even if you are innocent.
When you hear his excuse, fertility drugs, of course it sends off alarm bells in the NFL, because it's well known that certain steroids have been masked by using fertility drugs. Yeah,
and I always find it difficult, and so by no means am I a doctor or a pharmacist, but I find it difficult that you would be a pro athlete in your 30s, right? So, and whether it's your 20s or your 30s, and need fertility drugs. But I don't quite know how biology works. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert. So
that's between Golden Tate and his physician. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if he suffers through that condition, I mean, that's his own personal business. However, if you're a pro athlete, you need to be stringent about what you put in your body even before you do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If there was even a potential for this to have caused him to fail a drug test, he should have been actively asking the doctors that question. So that's what definitely does make it a little bit more suspicious. And when you consider that, the Odell Beckham Jr. trade is going to be something that hangs over the season entirely. Now, I did like Eli's quote, hey, I've won a few games before Odell came. I did appreciate the shade at that. But with that said, you can't trade Odell Beckham, one of the most talented receivers, a generational talent at the position, for a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver in Golden Tate who primarily operates out of the slot. With that said, with that, you're basically saying that this offense is going to operate entirely within 1 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. And Eli, just to give you some numbers to give you an example of the decline in Eli Manning. Mm-hmm. So in terms of 1 to 10 yard completions, he ranked 21st. So he's also a bottom third quarterback in that regard. And then when you talk about his deep ball completions, completion percentage 20 yards deep was 36.7, which ranked him 26th. The worst being 30.8, the best being 61.5. Imagine you're talking about a Patrick Mahomes at that time, but that's terrible. They really should have resolved this issue a while ago. Mm-hmm. And it's just coming to a head now, and it just makes them look like a dumpster fire of an organization that's going to be in rebuild for quite a while.
Yeah. No, I think they're going to be rebuilding for a long time, and poor draft picks, right? Like Daniel Jones very much can prove us wrong. I thought the rest of their draft was okay, right? It was pretty decent. But when you're wasting top level picks, right, on quarterbacks that you can pick up in the second or third round, or any piece, right? Like, so even if it was a running back or a wide receiver that people that was going to go in the second or third round, do not waste one of your top picks on them.
And hey, if Gettleman, you have a conviction to go with this guy, you believe he's your guy, then yes, you draft him. You absolutely draft people that you believe in. It makes sense. But it's not so much that you drafted him. It's where you drafted him.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
You know, they even had a first-round pick that they ended up using on Dexter Lawrence here, pick number 17. Are you going to tell me that Daniel Jones wouldn't have fell to that?
Exactly.
Had to draft him 6? Mm-hmm. You're telling me you couldn't even have drafted him in the second round potentially. Mm-hmm. In fact, this team drafted 3 times in the first round. Mm-hmm. So at any point, one of those picks could have been allocated towards Daniel Jones, because no one else I could be wrong. There might be some insiders that say Daniel Jones was going to go to the Redskins if he was there. Mm-hmm. But I don't buy it. I just don't see it.
I don't see it either. So, I mean, I guess we should wrap up, right? Like on this topic, get to our other 2 teams. I personally, with one, their receivers being sort of a mess. You got old Golden Tate. Sterling Shepard might be injured. Saquon Barkley, I feel bad for him, right? He's going to be one of the best talents to be on one of the worst teams for his entire rookie contract. I have him going 4-12, finishing last in the division.
Gettleman might as well trade him now and get 3 defensive linemen out of Clemson.
No, they'll choose all quarterbacks that are not top 3 level.
All right. Well, I'm just going to end with my prediction: 3-13.
Okay.
On to sunnier news. And, I guess you could say it's going to be always sunny in Philadelphia this year, as I project the Eagles to be leading the way in the NFC. I have this team finishing 13-3. I have Carson Wentz returning to MVP form, and this roster is imposing.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. So I'll say I have them winning the division too. I don't have them going 13-3. That's pretty ballsy for me to give a team a 13-3. I have them at 11-5, which they may flip with the Cowboys depending on what happens. But that's pretty ballsy. Go ahead, explain.
Okay. Well, ultimately what's going to come down to is Carson Wentz's health.
Yeah.
So in 2017, Carson Wentz was arguably going to win the MVP. Mm-hmm. He was outstanding. 3,296 yards, 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He was on top of the world. And then he suffered a brutal injury trying to use his athleticism to get into the end zone. And that's just going to be how he plays. It is concerning if you're looking into his long-term prospects. But last year was kind of a year for him to rehab. Mm-hmm. Granted, again, he did get hurt again. Separate injury. It's at some point we're going to open up a discussion about injury prone versus bad luck. I mean, there's a lot of players that could fall under that, so I'm not going to open up that can of worms right now. Mm-hmm. but they added pieces around him that I think can only make him better. They brought back Deshaun Jackson, which Deshaun Jackson, even at this point in his career, can still burn. We saw him have a lot of great moments last year in Tampa with Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing them the ball. So you can't tell me that you put him with Carson Wentz, that's not going to be a dynamic connection. They improved the backfield this year. They added Jordan Howard, who Jordan Howard gets a bad rap because I feel like it's not that he was a bad running back last year. I feel like he was a bad fit for what Matt Nagy wanted to do.
Yeah.
In 2016, he ran for 1,300 yards. 2017, 1,100 plus yards as well. He's going to be a solid early down back, and one of the main things that people give him criticism for is his ability to catch out of backfield. I don't think it's that he can't do it. I don't think he's just been given the right opportunity to display that skill set. You had a Tariq Cohen there in Chicago that took away the necessity for him to be a pass-catching back.
Yeah.
They drafted Miles Sanders this year, who is a Pennsylvania native, went to Penn State. And if it wasn't for the running back we just discussed a second ago, Saquon, he would have hands down been a starting back for the majority of his college career. He was a 5-star recruit when he signed with Penn State. And in his year prior to coming out in the draft, he ran for 1,274 yards on 220 carries, averaging 5.8 yards per carry. Now, he likes to dance in the backfield, which, hey, that works when you have this offensive line that the Eagles do, which is arguably the best offensive line in the game. And I just think that they have the best head coach not named Bill Belichick in the league.
Yeah. I mean, another one of the weapons that they have, right, is Zach Ertz, which we didn't discuss because he's not a shiny new toy. But at tight end, like that's a dangerous weapon right there. He's
you have
top 3 tight end in the league right now.
Well, certainly. And then one of the best things about having a Zach Ertz is in third down situations, he's almost unstoppable.
Oh yeah.
So I think this team is set for another Super Bowl run. The interesting things, though, I do want to touch on when it does come to Carson Wentz. So they got rid of the security blanket behind him, Nick Foles. Foles is now in Jacksonville. The question I have, so it's worse for the team as a whole, because if Wentz does go down, obviously I don't think Nate Sudfeld is going to be able to carry the load. But I think it might be better for Wentz, because think about this from a Wentz perspective. He was riding high. Like I said, he was having an outstanding season, gets hurt, and then has to watch his team go on to win a Super Bowl without him. Now, I get it. He's a professional, but, from a human standpoint, I'm sure that had to affect him, and certainly may have affected him a little bit last year. Now that the team fully invested in him, gave him that new contract, they got rid of Nick Foles. They said, you're our guy. So that's like a cloud that's no longer weighing on him. I feel that's going to make him only a better player. You did see some headlines described him as selfish, failed to take accountability, egotistical by unnamed sources out of that locker room. I think that's going to fade a little bit. I think the whole Foles situation, them winning games without him in the postseason, may refocus him, may push him to become a better teammate if he is truly lacking in those categories. And it's only going to be better for the team.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think from a psychological perspective, right? Like we talked about shipping off Josh Rosen earlier because of Kyler Murray. And it simply is that psychological effect of, oh, when I screw up, I know who's got my job right behind me, right? Or you're always looking over your shoulder because, you got a Nick Foles right behind you. So I do definitely think that helps from a psychological perspective. I'm hoping that from a health point, if he can just get to 80% of what he was, I think even that is a good quarterback in this league. Definitely if he can get to 90, 100%. But even just 80% of what he was, that sort of MVP season that he was having, I think is going to be good. I worry about their defense, though. So last year they were like 23rd in yards allowed or something. So the defense wasn't outstanding. But I think if their defense even just gets the middle of the pack this year,
well, they did make improvements there. They did go out in free agency and acquire Malik Jackson, which is a very dominating force on the defensive line. So I think that's going to help them. And they should have some better health in their secondary. They were kind of piecing it together at the end.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think they will improve on the defensive end. If they can improve dramatically, and then along with the offensive weapons, as long as Wentz, like I said, is playing at least 80% of what he was that MVP season, I see him right now going 11-5. Yeah, winning the division. Though,
yeah, I mean, and one thing too I want to mention too, this team is going to change around their offense. I think last year their leading rusher was Josh Adams with 511 yards. I mentioned the 2 additions that they made in that backfield.
Yep.
I think that's going to change up entirely how they run their offense. It's going to take a lot of attention off Wentz to make those big plays that have caused him to get injured in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. There's going to be so many threats from so many different angles that you got to worry about, that not as much pressure is going to be applied to Wentz.
You know, one thing too, a parallel I want to draw. So we did mention, when does this New England dynasty end? You know, I think back to college football here. We've noticed some cracks in the Alabama dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Nick Saban has established his long track record of success. And then in comes this program named Clemson, led by head coach Dabo Swinney.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of parallels to draw behind Doug Peterson and Dabo Swinney in correlation to Nick Saban and Bill Belichick.
Huh.
That's kind of a thought like I kind of was having today. Like, I could see this team, like, they have a championship roster. They won it a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, things went wrong again. Their quarterback gets injured. They're struggling a little bit. They still manage to sneak in the playoffs and win a game. It tells me that this team is just well coached and well run from top to bottom.
Yeah. No, front office is operating really well, right? They get them the pieces that they need. Obviously, they saw that they had some gaps on offense last year. Plug some of those gaps. We talked a little bit about their defense. So yeah, I could definitely see that, and I could see this as an organization challenging to sort of take over, especially on the NFC side, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I said 13-3. Sorry, one more time, your record.
I got them 11-5. Like I said, I have them right now as first, but it depends on what happens with the Zeke situation.
Okay, and yeah, might as well get into it because, to be frank, the Cowboys, there's a long list of things to talk about when it comes to them.
Oh, yeah.
So I have established, and just to get this out of the way and out into the open, I have 2 different records for them. I have one with Zeke, one without Zeke.
Mm-hmm.
With Zeke, 11-5. Without
Okay.
Zeke, 9-7. So I'm essentially saying Zeke equals 2 games.
Yeah, that's about what I have for Zeke. I have their max being 12-4, so they would slightly overtake the Eagles in my predictions. But at the lowest, maybe 9-7. So about that 2 to 3 game mark when it comes to Zeke.
Yeah, and I just think that when you look at this roster, they have the 2 young linebackers back there in Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, that just cause all kinds of trouble. Dak, obviously he's not going to make the outstanding play. Just to throw it out there, Dak's not going to compete for an MVP.
Mm-mm.
But
he's gotten worse every single year that he's played. Like, even though record-wise they were better last year.
Yeah, and in fact, I was going to mention this statistic. Over the Dak's 3 years as starter, he has 32 wins. Only Tom Brady has more in that time.
Mm-hmm.
That speaks a testament to, at minimum, he provides a level of consistency and stability for them at that position, which is sometimes all you really can ask for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you put a top 5 roster around like someone like that, sometimes it could lead into bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
They went out of their way, acquired Amari Cooper last year. And Amari Cooper, his time with the Cowboys was something spectacular. So his entire 2017 season with Oakland, 48 receptions, 680 yards, 7 touchdowns, 14. That's in 14 games. In just the 9 games he played with Dallas, 53 receptions, 725 yards, 6 touchdowns.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know very well because I had him on my fantasy team last year and literally got rid of him the last week he was in Oakland then sure enough, Dallas picks him up and he started popping off.
Did that too. Got to play him in the playoffs. I had George Kittle that week when he went off. Thought I won. Then Mari said no with his game against the Eagles last year. Pre-trade, this team was 3-4, averaging 183 passing yards per game, which was ranked 30th in the NFL at the time. Over the next 9 games, they averaged over 250 yards passing, and their third down percentage went from 32% to 48%, which over that span was number 1 in the NFL. So, you know what? They have Amari Cooper there. I feel as though as long as this guy stays healthy, they upgraded when swapping out Randall Cobb for Cole Beasley. Jason Witten's return, not to pull a rabbit out of my head, but I think that this guy can actually slide back onto the field perfectly because they're not going to ask him to do a ton. I feel as though he's mostly just there to be a security blanket over the middle, which is all he needs to be. His last year with the team in 2017, 63 receptions, 560 yards, 5 touchdowns, a 72.4 catch percentage. So I think as long as you're not asking Jason Witten to do a whole lot, and who knows, maybe the year off too also helped him refresh. Maybe he uses all the extra hate he received as an announcer to fuel him in the gym these days.
Well, so that's an interesting point, right? So when we look at athletes that take a year off, this is what I wonder if it hurts them or if it helps them.
Well, we'll get into that in particular, I think, when we start talking more about the load management in the NBA. I think the general thought is that for older players, it's thought to be more of a help. You would definitely classify Jason Witten as more of an older player, albeit it's just going to be interesting to see whether or not he can adjust back to the speed of the game. Taking a year off, it's one thing to be up in the booth seeing these guys tackle each other. It's another thing to have them chasing you down.
Yeah, and the workouts are very different, right? So I'm sure he stayed in shape. He had plenty of time to lift weights and whatever. But are you doing the sprints and the conditioning that you would do in an NFL practice? Probably not, right? Like even the lifting program, you're now probably lifting for more of your physique rather than actually what you would need to play. Like, so how the strength and I guess sort of physique that you would need for playing is different from when you're retired and you're looking to, hey, I just want to build my physique just for looks, right? So a lot of this stuff could possibly change and affect him.
Well, I think that actually brings up an interesting point when we start to talk about this Zeke holdout. So obviously Zeke's in Cabo.
Yep.
He's reportedly working out, reportedly working out with NFL players, even though if you technically think about that, other NFL players are right now in camp.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At least not current NFL players, right, on current rosters. So it does. Oftentimes you do see these holdout situations not exactly go too well, albeit we have seen a history of Zeke being able to miss games, come back, and perform at the same level because he apparently just can't control his behavior. And that's the reason we've seen him miss games in the past. And well, that's what I worry about him being in Cabo too and missing this time is a mature player that is experienced and says, hey, I know my worth. I'm holding out till I get paid, right? I trust them to, yes, do their workouts, to do what they need to do while they're away, to still conduct their behavior in a professional manner. Whereas Zeke, though, I question his maturity from the standpoint that he's gotten in trouble a lot. And is he really disciplined to keep working out? I think he is, right? Like I take him at his word, and if he says he's working out, he's working out. But I don't know if I trust his maturity for him to be away off in a place like Cabo right now.
Well, here's the main point of contention. If you're the Cowboys, what do you do with this situation? Because Zeke's technically skipping in line, because right now Dak and Amari are both playing out the final years of their contract. They need to be focusing on those guys first. And
Absolutely.
hey, it may suck for Zeke, but there is a certain order to the way that these are done. And Dak and Amari certainly have earned that right to get their extensions. Now, what is Zeke's goal? Because when we start getting into the point where he's missing game checks,
Mm-hmm.
it goes what we were saying with Le'Veon Bell, like you're losing money now to hopefully make money later. But the problem with Zeke is 2 years out on his deal. If he misses this year, if he pulls a Le'Veon Bell, he doesn't accrue that league year.
Yeah, so he still has another 2 years to go.
Yeah, so he, in theory, would have to play for the Cowboys or get traded. And when we talked about the Melvin Gordon situation last week, I threw that out there. I think maybe the Cowboys should seriously consider a trade if there's one out there for the right value. Granted, when you have this, you're obviously risking him hurting that trade value substantially.
Yeah.
If I'm the Cowboys, I'm taking a gamble on my ability to win the early part of my season, because here's their first few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Giants, Redskins, Dolphins.
Yeah.
In theory, they could potentially win all three of those, be 3-0, sitting pretty, until they have to play the Saints in week 4 and the Packers in week 5.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Zeke, can you afford to miss those games? Because if they're winning without you, it only hurts your value.
Yeah. And not only that, they drafted 2 running backs this year, I believe. So you got 2 running backs that have the potential. I don't think they're as talented as Zeke, right?
No.
So that's not what I'm saying. But think about the James Conner, Lev Bell situation. Lev Bell said, hey, I'm going to hold out. Let's see how you do without me. James Conner started to shine like a star. And what everybody say, oh, yeah, they'll be just fine without you, right?
And it's possible when you consider the offensive line that they have, that those running backs there can at least produce in terms of numbers relatively to the same level as Zeke or comparable numbers, just because they have the benefit of running behind, again, one of the better offensive lines in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, they signed Alfred Morris this offseason, and Alfred Morris served as a complimentary piece a couple of years back when Zeke was suspended, and he ran really well in those games. So he knows the offense. In theory, he could just slide right back into that role. Again, this just goes back into what we were saying last week. You're not really negotiating from a position of strength with this one.
Yeah.
Just need to play out this year and look to receive his extension next year.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think you're exactly right with the offensive line take, right? Because so many times running backs, and I've said it in the past, is that their production is dependent on how good your offensive line is. And that's part of the problem with doing analytics in football, why it's so difficult to be able to do analytics and change the game with analytics like you can with baseball or basketball, is that so many pieces are dependent on each other. And so while, yes, there was a stretch where they were very bad when, Zeke was on his ban because of his prior offenses and behavior. But still, Zeke alone does not necessarily make your team all that much better if there's no line to block for him and protect him. So that's, like I said, that's going to be my closing statement on the Zeke situation, that he needs to play at least this year and hope for the best next year when he negotiates, and hopes that this doesn't further hurt his case in seeking Todd Gurley money, as it's going to be proclaimed, because he's going to reset the market when he does get paid. And then eventually that's going to be surpassed by whatever Saquon gets in his next deal. Yep. Assuming their health, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully they stay
Let's
healthy.
talk about the guys that are in line for extensions and whether or not they're deserving. So I mentioned the Amari effect earlier, what he did for the Cowboys in terms of their record, in terms of where they stood statistically. I think that this guy needs to get paid. The only question you have with Amari is where in terms of his position does he rank?
Yeah.
So we've seen him at his worst in those years with Oakland, and then we saw a small sample size of 9 games where he looked like a top 5 talent in the league.
Well, and there was this period of time where he did look very good in Oakland too, right?
Yeah,
Then he regressed. And
yeah, he took a huge step back in that 2017 season, whereas he was produced for 1,100 plus yards the previous year. That was, if I'm not mistaken, also the same year that the Raiders did end up going to the playoffs prior to Derek Carr's injury. So you could argue that his numbers took a step back merely because Derek also has taken a step back and still hasn't found his right footing quite yet either.
Yeah. I could buy that argument.
But Amari Cooper does have the pedigree. He was a top prospect when he did come out in his draft. The only comparable wide receiver in that draft was Kevin White, who's now out of the league. But in theory, I think that Coop could potentially be a top 15 type wide receiver. I don't want to go through wide receiver rankings right now, but I know for a fact that there's 10 wide receivers that I would rather have on
at least,
Amari. So he's not going to get what Michael Thomas just got. He's not going to get anywhere near what Antonio Brown, OBJ, among others got. That exact number I can't say for certain right now, but he needs to be paid more like a top 15 wide receiver rather than a top 10.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be the thing. Though he does have a case to make, right? Like we said, their record was not that good last season until they went out and got Amari Cooper, right? So similar to, I guess, sort of the Zeke argument of Zeke saying, hey, remember that stretch of games where the NFL banned me for a little bit, right? Like, you guys were awful without me. Now I'm back. Amari Cooper, I think, has now that sort of same argument of, hey, look at where you guys were going. We're definitely not going to win the division without me. Now all of a sudden you got me.
Well, if he continued the same pace that he had in those 9 games, he would be well over 100 catches, well over 1,000 yards, and at least double-digit touchdowns.
Yeah.
But the main question, though, is when you consider his career averages, will he regress to the mean? And I think that's more likely, especially, too, because this team did add more in terms of wide receiving talent with, like I mentioned, Randall Cobb, Jason Witten coming back as opposed to having a tight end collection composed of like Rico Gathers.
Yeah.
So in theory, I do believe that Cooper's numbers are going to take a step back. Also, too, I don't think new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore necessarily wants to have a prototypical number 1 target that takes the majority of the target share away, because those teams traditionally haven't been the top teams in the league. Most of the teams that have one wide receiver garnering the majority of targets tend to actually be on the bottom tier. So I do think that it's going to be interesting negotiating. With Dak is going to be an interesting one. So I definitely do believe Dak needs a raise. He is paid $700,000 a year as a 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
But do I believe that Dak needs to go from $700,000 to $30 million a year? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at it statistically, outside of wins, right? Wins and losses, they've been actually pretty decent over the seasons that Dak has played. But other than that, statistically, he hasn't proven to be a consistent passer. He hasn't proven all that much to be the type of quarterback that is demanding of that money. And I mean, I think, right, so Minnesota just overpaid for a quarterback, I think. And you really don't want to put yourself in that situation, especially when you have now Ezekiel Elliott wanting to get paid, Amari Cooper wanting to get paid.
Jalen Smith and Leighton Van Esch soon down the pike.
So you don't want to overpay if you don't have to. So I don't know.
Yeah, and to best utilize Dak's skill set, as I mentioned, he needs a top-end roster to be able to succeed. I don't envision Dak as the type that would necessarily be able to carry a team entirely on his own merits. Granted, he's going to be able to throw these statistics out there to the Cowboys in negotiation. 15 game-winning drives, most in the NFL since 2016. 13 wins on prime time, most in the NFL, where we talk about like a quarterback like Andy Dalton who falters in those moments. I think that those are strong points where negotiating from not a position of strength with Zeke, I think that Dak does have that ability to be able to command a little bit more influence as a quarterback.
Yeah, and something even non-football statistics-wise, right? I'm sure he has one of the best-selling jerseys in the country, likely, right? So the Cowboys have a huge brand, and so he can easily say, hey, I've been getting paid the $700,000 a year on my rookie contract, yet you've been profiting a lot of money off my jersey sales. I'm cashing it.
He is the 42nd ranked quarterback in terms of base salary. Now, I'm not a math expert by any means, but I believe there's only 32 teams in the league.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that there are backup quarterbacks that are getting paid more than this guy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So he definitely does need a bit more of a pay jump. I don't know if other guys are going to be willing to take a little bit of a haircut on the front end. It doesn't seem like it when you have 3 huge contract situations all in the same offseason.
Yeah.
Not even, too, we're not even talking. Like I mentioned, Jalen Smith is going to get a high-end linebacker contract, and then that offensive line only has a few more years. This might actually be the culmination of that offensive line really sticking together when everyone starts to want to get paid or age out as well.
Yeah. And honestly, I think the thing too, right, is what is the ceiling for this team? Because if the players believe that their ceiling is they win a Super Bowl, maybe some of them are all willing to say, hey, we can all stick together, right? Like, we believe in this team. We think we could win a Super Bowl. I'll take a little bit of a haircut if we all do. But if there's not that great of a chance of winning a Super Bowl, which I would argue, right, like they're sticking with Jason Garrett as a coach for now, right? It seems like he's a little bit more on the hot seat. But Jerry Jones has not wanted to move off of Jason Garrett. I think he's an awful coach. I don't think he's a good coach by any means. And so I don't think he can get them to a Super Bowl. I don't think Dak as a quarterback is a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
It'd be interesting to see if Kellen Moore, if he flashes in this tryout as offensive coordinator, whether or not the Joneses believe in him moving forward, because one of the main reasons they've liked Jason Garrett and they stuck with Jason Garrett is their belief that he's generally their guy. Kellen Moore has been in the system since he got out of Boise State, so they might have the same kind of respect. And the movement is towards these young, dynamic, good-looking, offensive-minded coaches. So I think Kellen Moore checks off a lot of boxes in that category. Mm-hmm. But could they potentially hire within in terms of if they move off of Garrett?
Which I wouldn't be surprised if they do, right? And I think there is something to Jerry Jones, right? So he's the manager or general manager. I think he does like a little bit of control over the coaching decisions, and that's why I think he's kept Jason Garrett around. And I think Kellen Moore, he may give, depending on how he does as a coordinator this year, he may give him a little bit more freedom and a little bit more leeway. But I still think Jerry Jones would think, hey, we've brought him up through our system. We hired him internally. I still get some say. He knows how things get done around here.
Alternatively, too, like if this team, let's say they live up to the highest expectations, my prediction, and go 11-5, what do they have to not do for Jason Garrett to even lose his job?
So for Jason Garrett to lose his job, I would hope that if they don't make the playoffs right away, Jerry Jones fires him.
Okay, that's an instant. Yeah, that's an instant cut. If you don't make the playoffs with this roster, that's an unmitigated disaster.
Exactly. So if they don't make the playoffs at all, even a wild card spot, like you're getting cut right away. If they have, so there's been coaches that have been fired for less, right? But if they even maybe make it to the semifinals, right, of the conference, right? So they get past the first round of the playoffs and then lose. I could still see Jason Garrett getting fired by your typical GM, by your typical owner. Jerry Jones, though, like I said, I think he sort of likes this game. He likes having control over Jason Garrett. He's kept him around a lot longer than most probably thought he should have been around. So I wouldn't be surprised if he kept him around there. But I would say that's probably pushing it into the gray area as a second-round exit in the playoffs.
One thing you got to say about Jerry, too, is like, and two, this goes with his hand in hand with his son, Steven. They have done a great job as far as roster construction. There was a point like a few years ago where Jerry Jones issued the quote, he would have fired himself as GM. But honestly, they've done a good job of building this roster when you look at it. Yeah. You looked into a quarterback in the fourth round. Not a lot of teams can say they've done that. Mm-hmm. But to have a seamless transition between Tony Romo and Dak is fantastic. Yeah, this team did a great job of rebounding. Now it's going to be interesting. They've hit the point where everyone needs to get paid. So this is where you start to see rosters fall apart.
Mm-hmm. And this is where I think an experienced GM, where it's only the GM's job, right? Like that's their only job. They're not the owner of the team. They're not concerned with business sales or anything like that. Like they're concerned with what do I do with this roster? And that's where I think having an actual GM like that would help, right? Where can we cut some guys that are maybe, we might overpay for them, so we better get rid of them? And who can we bring in? What young talent is, cheap right now that we can buy low before we have to sell high and still keep this team afloat? And that's where I don't know if Jerry Jones is good enough right now as a GM. Though you're right, he did a great job building this current roster. I can easily see that this team after this year falling apart again and then being right back out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, very likely. All right. Well, like I said, 11-5. What was your prediction again?
So at their peak, I think they can go 12-4. Though what I will say, between their games and the Eagles games, right? They do have slightly harder games to play. So they do have like the Rams, I think, and the Patriots are some tough ones on there. The Saints are some tough ones. So I think 12-4 is their ceiling. They might possibly overcome Philly, but right now I have them sitting at 10-6, finishing second in the division.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. It was a bit of a long one, we do appreciate you sticking with us. If you made it all the way to the end, we're going to hope to cut down on these as we go. We're still rookie podcasters figuring it out. With that said, please go ahead, give us a look, like I mentioned, on the Spotify app, the Google Play Store, iTunes, or even our YouTube channel to find future episodes. Also, look up our social media. Find us at SlumpbusterPod on Twitter and Slumpbuster Podcast on Instagram. Aundre, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Juju.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.